All right, hello and welcome everybody back to Otronicon. This is day 3. This morning we have a really great presentation, but first I want to make sure that you know how to submit any questions, comments, or even any chat that you would like. So there should be a question box either to the side or to the top of your screen. If it is not a physical box, it will be a circle with a question mark in it. Go ahead and click on that circle, and then there should be a box that appears where you can send in any kind of information you'd like to. If you're having any technical difficulties, also go ahead and send that there. We'll make sure to connect with you and help you get connected. And with that said, I'm going to pass it off to Jeanette.
Hi guys, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Jeanette Johnson, the co-founder and creative director of Wall Crawl, and today, as promised, we'll be speaking about the science behind what universally brings us joy. So first, I just wanted to start off by sharing a little bit more about myself and why I am so passionate about this topic. So my journey really began in 2010. I started a fashion blog, what's now known as a fashion blog, and I did so with the intent of actually wanting to change the landscape of fashion journalism. I wanted it to be more inclusive of sort of realistic fashion and budget-friendly fashion. And to my surprise, and I think everyone else's, it completely took off. And it became my full-time job very quickly. And I found myself working with companies like Macy's and JCPenney and Nordstrom regularly. I employed a team. It became a whole animal of its own. And what was interesting about that is I noticed that I actually had some tension in my life about that, because I grew up and I was raised that aesthetics, decorating ourselves, decorating our surroundings, are really just not something we spend our time and money on. It was not as important, creativity and kind of lollygagging around is not as important as hard work. And it just was not something that I ever felt like I should spend a lot of time on, or that was important. And so for me to be finding myself in a career that was pretty much all creative and aesthetics based, really created a lot of tension in my life. So I actually wound up writing a book about it that was published by Waterfall Press in 2017. And the part of my journey that is most relevant to today's talk, we'll be speaking about it a lot, is Wall Crawl. So my husband and I opened Wall Crawl in August 2019 in downtown Orlando. And it's really easier to show you Wall Crawl than to explain it because it's such a visual business, but this is just a snapshot of our Instagram. So just a few pictures to look at. And essentially what Wall Crawl is a photo studio with a twist. So you can go there with your family just like you would a mall photo studio and get professional photos taken. We also charge by an admission fee, so you can actually go and take your own photos with your phone or your camera. It's a great resource for photographers to take their clients and take photos of them, or to complete their own personal projects. We've had some music videos shot there, and it's also a great place to gather. Certainly, more so before COVID, we had a lot of events, but still some small gatherings here and there. So why Wall Crawl, right? So this talk today about the science behind what brings us joy, and also why joy is important, is really near and dear to my heart, because my husband and I, we put all of our resources into opening this business. We did it completely alone. We bootstrapped everything along the way. And for us, the mission is to spread joy. That is why we do what we do. It's why we show up every day. We aim to put smiles on people's faces. And sometimes that can be tough still with my upbringing. I'm still working in an aesthetic-based job. And ultimately, I know, and we all know, that our frontline workers, our doctors and our nurses, are out there saving lives. And what we're doing at Wall Crawl is not saving lives. It's not quite that cool. But I will say that having studied this topic for years, and a lot of the science and research that I'm going to present today, I've just really come to believe that joy and creativity is an absolutely noble cause. And it's something that we should absolutely feel comfortable spending our time and efforts on. So without further ado, we'll get started. And if we're going to be talking about joy, we absolutely have to define joy first. So interestingly, scientists will often use the words joy, happiness, positivity. Yes?
I'm so sorry, we don't see your screen.
Oh, Goodness gracious. How do I?
So there we go. Now I'm seeing.
It was
Um,
there. Oh, there.
there
There
we
we
go.
go. Thank you
Sorry
so much.
about
I was
that.
actually wondering about that. I was like, I wonder if they can see that. Thank you.
No
So
problem.
this was the slide before, just real quick, so everyone can see. This was the snapshot of wall crawl. Gives you just a little bit of an idea. So there's 20 different walls that change seasonally. And we'll be talking a lot about the design elements behind it because I'm the one that creates the walls and we release about 40 new designs every year. So it changes often. Okay, so what is joy? So as I was saying, researchers, or I'm sorry, scientists rather, they're usually very precise with their language. However, they often use the words joy, happiness, and positivity in overlapping or even interchangeably. And so for the purposes of today's talk, we're going to be focused more on the way that psychologists define joy. And that's to say that it's a very different emotion than happiness. And it's a much stronger, less common feeling. It comes on suddenly and it makes us want to jump up and down, which is actually the technical measurement that researchers use to measure joy is, does this feeling make me want to jump up and down, which I absolutely love. Like that's a technical measurement. So Merriam-Webster has a lot of different definitions of joy, but I thought this one resonated the most with the joy that we're talking about today, which is a state of felicity, a source or cause of delight. And I love this analogy from diffin.com. So it says, imagine happiness as a 100-story building, and each level corresponds to a happiness value, and that happiness can persist for a long time at any level. Joy is the elevator in the building that takes you up to higher levels of happiness only for a small amount of time and back. So again, that jump up and down feeling. And in my opinion, joy is almost impossible to resist when it does come. It's kind of like a sneeze. It's like this burst. And so if I asked you right now, what makes you happy? You might say things like having strong relationships or finding success at work, being healthy, making my kids happy. These are typically more long-term, in a sense, harder to control and a little more complicated, those levels of the building. But if I ask what makes you feel joy, you might say things like blowing bubbles, Legos, hopscotch, fireworks, ice cream cones. These are very specific and things that you can actively seek out and have control over. So that's kind of the difference in what we mean when we say joy, when we're talking about it today. So that's what joy is, but why does it matter? So I absolutely love this. The author Neil Samudre wrote this little excerpt that I want to read because it so captures my own interesting tension around this topic. He says, joy is often thought of a frivolous and hokey sentiment. It's a squishy concept lumped with happiness, and together they frolic in fields and make a regular occurrence in Disney films. Hardly anyone knows how to speak about joy or make it a priority in life. So why would I believe joy is necessary, and why would I pursue it? Today's society needs more joy, but is cynical about experiencing it. So I want to make the case today for taking joy more seriously, first and foremost, because there are health benefits. So when we're stressed, we know that we get a shot of adrenaline and our blood pressure increases. Moments of joy are actually shown to release dopamine in the body, which effectively resets you back to homeostasis. Some studies have even found that people who laugh every day, for example, are less likely to have a stroke. There's a ton of research out there about laughing and happiness and joy, if we can use this interchangeably in that case, and how they can really affect your health. So that's hard to argue with. That's some science for you right there. Next, it's contagious. So when you are in the habit of seeking out joy, studies show that you find yourself attracting more and more joy throughout your day. It's also contagious to those around you. So one of my favorite examples of this is, I don't have to be at wall crawl myself to experience the joy that happens there. Just seeing how happy people are in the photos that they post gives me a little jolt of joy throughout the day. Joy also keeps us present. So joy is an emotion that we experience here and now, which means we're less likely to be worrying about the past, to be anxious about the future. Instead, we're enjoying that moment and being fully present, connecting with whoever we're with. Think about how you feel when you're engaged in play or an act of creativity, for example. It helps you unplug from your world for just a moment, and it's a great source of joy. Another good one, it makes us resilient. So there's a study done at the University of Michigan in 2004 that's well known. It's called the broaden and build theory, which has subsequently been studied and expanded upon. And it says that, in essence, positive emotions like joy help us bounce back faster from negative experiences. And not only does joy help us bounce back, but it can even make us more immune to those negative experiences in the first place. So one of my very favorite quotes from Brene Brown is, she's technically talking about creativity here, but I think there's a lot of overlap because the way that she describes this unused creativity we have, it's like we're not tapping into our joy. So I'll tell you the quote first. She says, unused creativity is not benign. It metastasizes. It turns into grief, rage, judgment, sorrow, shame. We are creative beings. We are by nature creative. So this ties back into this idea that joy actually makes us more immune to negative experiences in the first place, because when we're full of joy, we're not letting that creativity metastasize. So there you go. But I absolutely love this. Has been one of my biggest whys for opening Wall Crawl, is just creating a place for people that can come and get creative and use that creativity. All right, next, it makes us more productive. So one of my favorite studies, one of my favorite companies is nonprofit Publicolor. So they actually go around painting schools in bright colors and just adding murals and things like that. And administrators say that at those schools, it improves attendance when Publicolor comes in, the graffiti disappears, and kids actually say they feel safer. This also aligns with research conducted in 4 different countries, which shows that people working in more colorful offices are actually more alert, more confident, and friendlier than those working in drab, all beige spaces. And last but not least, it brings us together. So ask someone what sparks joy for you, and you will most likely find some overlap in what brings you joy. I mean, who doesn't love an ice cream cone, right? So in today's world, where we can often feel so divided across so many issues, joy is a great bridge for building connection and harmony. And it reminds us that our shared humanity, the building blocks that create joy, are almost universally the same for all of us. So our motivation for opening Wall Crawl was to spread joy and be a place for creativity based on a lot of this research. We watched the TED Talk by Ingrid Fettel-Lee called Where Joy Hides and Where to Find It, and totally kept me up at night. I highly recommend it. I've presented a lot of the research here, and I'm going to be talking about her book, but she showed how beige our world can be and how much, painting a school, for example, matters. And we felt like we want to do something about this. So we did. So next, we're going to talk about specifically what brings us joy in the physical world. And these are all a lot of elements that when I'm designing for Wall Crawl, I'm naturally drawn to, but I want to know, what does science say? It certainly helps me in my journey when I feel that tension between, is this really a noble cause? What I'm doing, is it really helping people? I always want to come back to the science and the research and say, what's there? What can we learn? And so this next section is, you can consider it a little mini Cliff's Notes or book report on the book Joyful by the same woman I mentioned earlier, Ingrid Fettel-Lee. Inspired by her TED Talk, I got the book. Absolutely love it. If you enjoy this part of the talk, I definitely recommend getting the book and reading it yourself. It's awesome. So she goes through, she is a senior design researcher, and so she talks about the research and the science behind why certain things make us really happy. And so the first one is energy. And energy is really also known as color, because color is energy made visible in the world. And brightness is a dimension like sunshine, for example, universally understood to be joyful. So the science behind this is really simple. Our inherent instinct has always been to find colorful things to eat in nature. And so our nourishment became intertwined with joy. And so we think about our, gut nourishment is intertwined with joy, but also our joy is intertwined now with finding energy or color. So I think one of the first things you notice about Wall Crawl right away is that there is so much color. It is just booming with color. Probably a bit much to put this in your house. I mean, you do you, but it's a little bit much. But it's so fun to be in this environment for a short time and take pictures there and really get creative. The next one is abundance. So some examples of this are confetti, rainbow sprinkles, polka dots, stripes, small things repeated many times create more joy than just one alone. For example, one confetto, which is the singular of confetti, is literally just a round dot. It really does not speak much to you, it does not spark much joy, but a bunch of them together is fabulous. So the science behind this is the legacy of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, because our biological nature is designed to help us navigate a scarce and uncertain world. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. I feel like we're naturally drawn to abundance because abundance is awesome. We want to have enough food in our lives. We want to have enough resources in our lives. And even if this is not, this could be different things for anyone. It can be that feeling you get when you look at your coin collection, because there's a lot of them in sequence together. If you're a chef, it's your spice collection. You have hundreds or thousands of spices. It's this idea that we have enough of something. Even if you're a minimalist in most of your life, I feel like certain places where abundance is just gives you this feeling, really satisfied feeling when things are in abundance. And certainly we know small children are not minimalists. Infants constantly seek sensory input. They want all the things all the time. And this actually helps with synaptic pruning for them. And it still helps us as adults, this synaptic pruning. So they actually use a therapy in the Netherlands to help dementia patients using multisensory environments of abundance. And so some examples of this at Wall Crawl is we have all these books, these brightly colored books, right? It would not have the same effect if it were just a couple of books or one book. And on the right, those are thousands of Post-its that I hung by hand. But it gives you this joyful feeling because there's so many of them. It's this feeling of abundance. And I love this one especially because it makes so much sense, but I never would have known to call it abundance. I think it's so often used in design and we don't even understand why completely, but knowing the science behind it is just really neat. So one of my favorite walls on the left here, we have literally thousands of pieces of candy, and it just gives you this feeling of like, yes, like who doesn't want, even if you're not eating all of it, because we don't eat those, but it's just so fun to have available to look at, just gives you this happy feeling. And on the right, a wall with like hundreds of hearts. It's the same idea. So we use abundance a lot, really many or most of the images from Wall Crawl can definitely be considered in this category of abundance. All right, next up is play. So Stuart Brown says that play is an instinctive, subcortical, primal force in humans. The need for play does not stop after childhood. So the science behind this, one study shows that looking at rounded facial features of babies or cartoon characters stimulates our medial orbitofrontal cortex, which gives us the urge to play. Play is often dismissed as frivolous or unnecessary, but a study in Japan recently showed increase in concentration and conscientiousness after looking at cute babies and animals. And maintaining a childlike perspective helps us keep open to fresh new ideas. So I love this quote also from the book. It says, Disney is valuable because it's one of the few places where adults give themselves permission to play. And we second that wholeheartedly and wanted to add Wall Crawl to the mix as a place where you can certainly play. So some examples are circles are again, that rounded feature gives us the urge to play. Anything with nostalgia and props you can touch. So we are big on getting you involved in the picture and it really brings out your playful side. Play is obviously more something that you can do in a sense, but aesthetically it's about urging you to play. So the books that you could play with, as these women are on the right being hilarious in my opinion. They did a whole series of photos like this together, clearly had no fun whatsoever. And then phones are also a big prop that we use a lot, which is so funny because their kids are like, what is this? But it's a lot of fun and it gives you something to play with. So we do things that urge you to touch and play. All right, next is Transcendence. This one is so much fun. So we use these phrases in our language all the time: walking on air, be on cloud nine, swept off our feet. Transcendence is things like the wonder of flight and beating gravity. So we tend to love things like Ferris wheels and tree houses and butterflies and clouds and bubbles. I have a feeling at least one of those things sparks joy for you. Certainly, most of them do for me. And the science behind this is simply that research has shown that gaining elevation, even just going up one flight of stairs, helps us focus on the big picture and less on the details. Elevation and a sense of lightness is really a universal metaphor for joy, which is why it's so often found in our language. So at wall crawl, again, I found myself just so drawn to transcendence without even realizing it. You know, we use these elements so often in amusement parks and places like that without even realizing it. So on the left, we have our birthday cake in the sky. So it's got clouds, and the hot air balloons give you the sense of lightness. On the right, we've had a couple of different swings at wall crawl, and they are always so popular. People love swinging around, and just that feeling of lightness and elevation, it can really come through in like a fun photo. There's also things, we use a lot of inflatables, which are, full of air. Obviously, some of them are even kind of floating off the ground. And on the left, we posted this bubble picture, which was like a little creative mini project someone wanted to do, and people were coming in to recreate it. It's so fun because that bubble, again, is just so something that brings people joy. And I think it's a great example of transcendence. All right, next up is harmony. So harmony can be found in so many places in our scientific world. It's the symmetry found in galaxies and atoms. It's repetitive beats like heartbeats. It's fractals in nature. And then it's, for us, objects organized by color, gradient, size, etc. So joy is this pleasurable awe sensation we get when we see related objects as a group, because our limbic system actually rewards us with joy for staying alert to making correlations and connections and recognizing patterns. So again, dating back to our ancestors, we were rewarded for noticing, hey, that pattern is a snake, or hey, these things are organized in a very organized way, which really helps with me getting dinner made and helps me survive. So just all these ways that our brain literally rewards us when things are put into a harmonizing pattern. So we have a lot of this at wall crawl too. There's a lot of patterns that we use. And a lot of these are also examples of other things too. So clearly both of these pictures are also abundance, and they're also showing color. But the harmony is that all these candies are organized by color into each individual jar. So we don't see all the colors mixed up in different jars, but they're all in their individual places where they should go. And with the flamingos, it's organized into a pattern. The stripes are all the same width. Everything's very symmetrical. Even the symmetry of the beach balls themselves, this is just very soothing to look at. And then these are two more examples. Obviously, the leopard spots on the right, that is literally in nature an example of something that your limbic system would reward you for spotting leopard spots because you'd want to stay safe. And on the left, there's harmony because all the colors are the same. All of these jars on the wall, they're all, in a similar color tone, and they're organized together. And there's just this wonderful awe sensation we get when we look at it. All right, so next up is surprise. So one of the best examples of surprise is like yarn bombing in an otherwise gray landscape, or even graffiti or a mural in like a surprising place, hidden gifts like piñatas, king cakes, and Easter eggs. And essentially what surprise does is it acts as a force multiplier for joy. So when something that's already joyful is placed in an unlikely setting, something different acts like this concentrated tincture spreading through water. And the science behind this, at just 3 months old, infants can detect the different object. So even at that young, you put some objects there and which one's different, and they can tell the difference. So our ancestors' survival depended upon being able to spot these changes. What's unusual in your surroundings? It's not just spotting those patterns, but it's what's out of place here, what looks different. And so at wall crawl, I often call it visual overload, because you're certainly surprised at every corner. Even if you've seen pictures online, I think it still gives you this feeling, which I likely think is joy. When you experience it in person, it just surprises you because it's so ridiculous in so many ways. And even we're in kind of an industrial area, and the burst of color comes out of nowhere. You walk up these stairs and you're just sort of surprised with all of these amazing sort of over the top sensory overload things. All right, so excuse me, magic. So magic is there's lots of examples: mermaids, unicorns, superheroes. In nature, it's the northern lights, fireflies, meteors, bioluminescence, prisms. Magic is, by definition, a gap between cognitive understanding and the sensory reality before us. So psychologists have actually found that those who don't believe in magic suffer from anhedonia. There's literally a word for it, which is the inability to enjoy life at all. And magic is valuable because it imbues life with a deeper sense of meaning. I absolutely love that. There's a good argument for joy right there, is that you don't want to not be able to enjoy your life at all. So at Wall Crawl, we use magic a lot. This unicorn obviously is a magical creature, which, by the way, is just a carousel horse that we turned into a unicorn with a 3D printer. But don't tell the little kids that, because they really think it's a unicorn. And the teddy bear, this huge oversized teddy bear, has a life of its own. You kind of imagine that it's real and you want to interact with it. And then on the left, you have sort of these giant wings that makes you feel like you're a mythical creature yourself. And on the right, our 2D cafe is so popular. And I think partly because it makes you look twice and you kind of wonder, is that real? What am I looking at here? I think there's a sense of magic in painting a room to look like this. And it truly sparks joy when you're there and when you see pictures of it. All right, last but not least, and there are a lot more examples, of course, in the book. The book is very in-depth. It's very good. Like I said, I highly recommend it, but is celebration. So celebration is a distinctly social form of joy, and it includes things like music and the power of synchronicity, but also bursts of energy like a champagne cork, glitter, disco balls, fireworks, pom-poms, balloons, and stretch limos. So the science behind this is at the heart of celebration is a mathematical paradox. The more we share joy, the more it grows. Celebration broadcasts our joy far and wide so that others can join in, and the more generous we are with our joy, the more we have for ourselves. So at Wall Crawl, we are all about celebration. I think so many of our walls speak to this, with just a couple of examples. We've got confetti and disco balls. They clearly look like they're celebrating something on the left. And our birthday cake is, or just our cake in general, is always a fun photo to snap so that you can post it on a day that you're celebrating something. We love celebrating with you. So in conclusion, the results. So I think in today's day and age, it just feels like people are more hungry for connection and creativity than ever. And, you know, when we first opened before COVID, we heard from people, you know, this is so much fun, and they enjoyed getting creative in our space. But now what we're hearing every day is thank you for being open, and thank you for doing this in a safe and responsible way. We have very limited capacities right now. We have tons of different safety protocols in place, but people are just so thankful that they have somewhere that they can go that is away from their, you know, at home Zoom life, and they can just experience something that's really over the top, that encourages play, that encourages creativity. We've also had seen a lot of companies wanting Wall Crawl to come in and create colorful backdrops and things in their own spaces. This idea of just spreading, you know, the color and the abundance and all of these design elements far and wide to increase joy everywhere has been really exciting to see more and more people embracing that, because we still do live in a little bit of a beige world. You know, typically hospitals, offices, schools, they can be really neutral, which is great, but we are big fans of having, you know, a little bit of joy infused here and there with your design. And certainly I hope that this has inspired you to insert a little joy into your day. There's so many free and easy ways to do so. I hope this gave you some ideas. We mostly focused on the aesthetics of joy, but at the same time, there's so many things like petting your dog that bring joy, that are free and don't have to do as much with aesthetics. And so I just want to close with posing a question of thinking about, where do you find joy? Perhaps it's the symmetry and harmony of a spreadsheet full of numbers. Maybe it's when the gears perfectly match up in your latest project. Maybe it's the play of tinkering in your workshop, or the abundant feeling you get by collecting lots of stamps or artifacts and displaying them. I would love to hear from you in the comments, or you can email me or send us a DM on Instagram. Or if you have any questions, let me know. But I hope this got you thinking about joy and ways you can seek it out in your own life and why it's so important.